A heated waterbed sat against the back wall of nearly every starter bedroom in suburban America in 1984. By 1987, it accounted for 1 in every 5 mattresses sold in the country, and the entire industry pulled in $2 billion before it collapsed. Number 22 arrived in the mail once a month for 9 years and trained a generation of mothers how to shop from the kitchen. Number 9 was banned by the EPA in 1989 over a chemical it had been shedding for 40 years. Number 1 was so common that real estate listings mentioned it as a feature. What most people miss about the 1980s American home is how fast the whole shape of it disappeared. Hit that subscribe button. Here are the 25 strange 1980s items you will not find in homes today. Number 25. The plastic milk box on the porch. A small insulated cube with a hinged lid sat on the side step of houses from Cleveland to Sacramento well into the early 80s. The milkman arrived before sunrise, lifted the lid, set in 2 glass quarts of whole milk, a pint of buttermilk, and sometimes a small carton of cottage cheese, then took the empties back to the dairy. By 1980, only about 3% of American households still received doorstep milk. The rest had switched to refrigerated grocery aisles, plastic gallons, and double coupon Wednesdays. The boxes stayed on the porch a few more years out of habit. Then the dairies closed. Then the boxes turned into planters, then disappeared. Some older homes in Pittsburgh and Boston still have the small built-in milk door cut into the kitchen wall. The hinges are painted shut. Nobody under 50 knows what they were for, and the families who do remember tend to talk about how cold the milk tasted on a July morning, and how the bottle sweated by the time you carried it inside. Number 24. The telephone with the extra-long curly cord. A heavy beige Western Electric model sat bolted to the kitchen wall of nearly every American home in 1984, and the spiral cord that connected the handset to the base was 12, sometimes 15 feet long, kinked into the shape of a slinky after years of being dragged into the pantry. Teenagers stretched it under the basement door for privacy. Mothers carried it to the stove while stirring spaghetti sauce. Fathers leaned against the refrigerator with it pressed to one shoulder, a beer in the other hand, listening to the dispatcher. The cord was always tangled. Always. Somebody in the family spent 5 minutes a week untwisting it, holding the receiver up by its collar and letting it spin. Cordless phones started showing up in 1984. The early ones cost about $99 and the reception cut out near the microwave. But by 1995, the wall phone with the curly cord was already a punchline. The cord, the wall hook, the busy signal, the way the whole kitchen revolved around one location, all of it gone. Number 23. The wood veneer console TV cabinet. A piece of furniture the size of a small dresser sat against the longest wall of the family room in 1985, and inside it lived a 25-inch screen, 2 speakers, and on the better models, a turntable that swung out on a hinge. Magnavox, Zenith, and Curtis Matthews built them. The wood on top was real veneer over particle board, and the family used it as a sideboard. Christmas cards leaned against the sound grill. A doily covered the cigarette burns near the volume knob. The picture tube weighed about 120 pounds, and when it broke, a repairman in a brown van came to the house with a meter and a soldering iron. Console TVs lasted into the early 90s, but big-screen rear projection sets were already taking the wall. By 2001, the last consoles were rolling off the line, and the families who had paid $819.79 for them gave them away on the curb. Most ended up at the dump. The wood top, the doily, the Christmas card scene, all gone with them. Number 22. The TV antenna with tinfoil rabbit ears. A pair of telescoping aluminum rods sat on top of the console in nearly every house that did not have cable, and getting Channel 4 to come in clear was a household sport. Somebody held the rod at a 45-degree angle, somebody else stood on one foot. A small triangle of tinfoil got wrapped around the tip on Sunday nights when the network movie came on. Cable rolled into American suburbs through the early 80s, and by 1989, about 53% of households had it. The other half kept fiddling with the rabbit ears. The signal stayed analog until June of 2009, when the FCC pulled the plug and every old set in America turned to snow on the same afternoon. The rabbit ears went into the garage with the foil still taped to one tip. Anyone under 35 today has never tilted a piece of metal toward a window to see if Magnum PI would show up sharper. Number 21. The beaded curtain in the doorway. Strands of plastic beads or bamboo cylinders hung from a wooden dowel in the arch between the kitchen and the den, and walking through them sounded like a cash register full of dimes. The Beauty View Company had been making them in Wisconsin since the early 60s, and a custom set could run $200 before the Taiwan imports knocked the price down to about $15. By 1984, you could pick up a set at any head shop, any Spencer Gifts in any mall in America. They divided rooms in apartments where the landlord did not allow doors. They covered closet openings in teenage bedrooms. They hung in the back of vans. By 1989, most were down. The plastic had cracked. The beads had gone dusty in a way no damp cloth would fix. They came back briefly in the early 2000s and again now in college dorms. But the original 1980s sets hanging in the doorway of a real adult kitchen are a sound nobody hears anymore. Number 20. The built-in ironing board cabinet. A narrow door cut into the wall between the kitchen and the laundry room opened on a hinge, and out swung a full-size wooden ironing board with the cover stapled on by the previous owner. Houses built between 1925 and the early 1960s came with these as standard. They lasted into 1980s households because nobody wanted to rip out perfectly good cabinetry. A mother could iron the husband's work shirts on Sunday night with the news on the kitchen radio, then fold the board back into the wall before the kids came down for breakfast. The ironing board cabinet died with the rise of permanent press fabrics, the cheap freestanding board from Kmart for $19.99, and the open-plan renovation that knocked out the wall it lived in. Walk through any 1980s tract home today, and you can sometimes still spot the door, painted over and screwed shut. Open it, and you will find the original board, the original cover, and a small box of old wooden clothespins that nobody touched since Reagan was in office. Number 19. The smoking stand ashtray with the chrome dome. A freestanding column with a heavy-weighted base and a lidded chrome bowl on top sat next to the recliner in living rooms across the country in 1984. The lid swung up. Ashes went in. A press of the chrome button rotated the disc and dumped the butts into the hidden chamber below. About 38% of American adults still smoked in 1984. Every family room had at least one ashtray, every car had a dashboard tray full of pennies, and the smoking stand was the polite version, the one for guests, the one that lived next to the good chair. Smoking rates fell to about 22% by 2002 and kept falling. The stands disappeared first from offices, then from homes. Most ended up at estate sales for $3 a piece, the chrome scratched, the felt base worn through, the old smell still clinging to the inside of the chamber the way certain things never really wash out. Number 18. The electric carving knife in a hard plastic case. A two-piece serrated blade snapped into a beige Hamilton Beach handle and lived in a molded plastic case at the back of the deepest kitchen drawer. Holiday dinners pulled it out twice a year. The motor whined like a small dental drill. The two blades sawed against each other in a way that turned a turkey breast into perfect quarter-inch slices, and the matching carving fork held the bird down while the man of the house performed the surgery in front of the family. Carved meat was a 1970s fixation that hung on through the 80s. By 1995, it had quietly died. The pre-sliced deli turkey from the supermarket killed half the demand. The microwave killed the other half. The case stayed in the drawer. Most American kitchens still have one in there somewhere, the cord tucked underneath the blades, the warranty card still folded inside. Nobody has plugged it in since the Clinton administration, and the only sound it makes anymore is the dry rattle when somebody rummages past it for a spatula. Number 17. The Curio cabinet with porcelain dolls. A glass-fronted display case stood in the corner of the formal living room, lit from within by a small bulb that came on with a switch under the bottom shelf, and behind the glass sat 14 porcelain dolls in elaborate Victorian dresses. The Franklin Mint sold them by mail, one a month, for about $95 apiece. The Bradford Exchange sold the matching plates. The Ashton Drake Galleries sold the babies. A mother could fill 4 shelves over a decade and never miss a payment, and the family was instructed not to touch the glass. Curio cabinets started disappearing from American homes in the late 90s as open-plan living killed the formal living room. The Franklin Mint went bankrupt twice, and the kids who inherited the dolls discovered they were worth about $20 on eBay. Most of the cabinets ended up at Goodwill. The dolls sit in attic boxes in plastic sleeves, the porcelain faces still smiling under a layer of dust nobody wants to disturb. Number 16. The PhoneMate Cassette Answering Machine. A beige rectangle with 2 small cassette doors sat on the table next to the kitchen phone, and a red light blinked when somebody had called. One tape held the outgoing greeting. The other tape recorded the incoming messages. The whole family gathered around it after work to find out who had called, and the tape made a small whirring sound when it rewound. After AT&T was broken up in 1984, sales of these machines passed 1 million units a year, and the price dropped from about $300 to under $100 inside 3 years. By 1992, digital memory had killed the outgoing tape. By 1998, cell phones were killing the whole machine. The voicemail box in your pocket replaced it for good. Anyone with a PhoneMate from 1985 still in the basement now owns a small archive of dead voices, and most people who pull the tape out and play it cannot get through the first message without sitting down. Number 15. The Bounce Dryer Sheet Dispenser Tin. A tall, round metal tin with a Bounce logo printed on the side sat on top of the dryer in laundry rooms across America, and the perforated sheets came out one at a time through a slit in the lid. Procter & Gamble launched Bounce in 1972, and by the mid-80s, the orange box was a fixture in every grocery cart. The dispenser tin was a Sears catalog item, the kind of thing somebody bought because the cardboard box looked cheap on the shelf next to the detergent. The tin lasted decades. The cardboard box did not. Today, the Bounce box still sits in the laundry room of about half of American households. But the metal tin is gone, replaced by nothing, because nobody decants laundry products into ceramic vessels in 2026. If you find one at a yard sale, it costs $4. The inside still smells faintly of the same artificial linen scent, and the lid still works exactly the way it did in 1984. Number 14. The Rolodex on the kitchen counter. A black metal drum the size of a softball spun on a small chrome axle next to the wall phone, and inside it lived 300 individually typed cards with names, addresses, and phone numbers. The doctor's office was filed under D. The pizza place was filed under T for the. The Rolodex was invented by Danish engineer Hildur Nielsen and patented in 1956, and by 1985 every kitchen had at least one and every office desk had a bigger version. Cards got added in pencil. Cards got crossed out in pen. The card for a deceased aunt stayed in the drum for years because nobody had the heart to pull it. Personal computers killed the office Rolodex first. Cell phones killed the kitchen one. The brand still exists as a vintage novelty, and the last person who actually thumbed through one to find a phone number was probably a grandmother in 2012 who still kept her dentist's number on a card her husband had typed in 1981. Number 13. The Mr. Coffee and Harvest Gold. A boxy automatic drip coffee maker in a color nobody under 40 has ever ordered for a kitchen sat on the counter to the right of the stove, and it hissed and gurgled at 6 in the morning 7 days a week. Mr. Coffee was launched in 1972 by Cleveland businessman Vincent Marotta, who had hired Joe DiMaggio for the commercials, and by 1979 annual sales topped $150 million. The brand owned over half the automatic drip market it had invented. Then the early 80s happened. Norelco came in, General Electric came in. Procter Silex undercut the price by $15, and Mr. Coffee's revenue slid from $150 million to $105 inside 3 years. The Harvest Gold model stayed on the counter, though. Families did not throw away a working coffee maker. The carafe stained brown along the inside, the heating element took longer to come up, and the timer stopped working sometime around the second Reagan term. Most of those machines are still in basements across the country. The cord is wrapped around the body. The lime scale is permanent. Walk into any estate sale in any small town in Ohio in 2026, and you will find one on the kitchen table, $4. The orange burner light still glowing the moment you plug it in. Number 12. The Sun Lamp Face Tanner. A small Norelco unit with a hinged hood and a row of fluorescent UV bulbs sat on the bathroom counter, and the user pulled it close to the face for 10 minutes a day in February to fight off the winter pale. A small pair of green plastic goggles came in the box. The bulbs warmed up with a faint hum, and the room smelled like ozone for an hour afterward. Home tanning lamps were sold in Sears and JCPenney through the early 80s. The FDA had begun investigating burn injuries in 1979, and by the early 90s, the warning labels covered half the box. Commercial tanning beds replaced them. Then the dermatology data caught up. Today, the home face tanner is gone from every American bathroom. The warning label that nobody read in 1985 turned out to be the one thing that should have been read, and the only people who still own a Norelco face tanner are the ones who pulled it out of the attic, looked at the bulbs, and decided to throw the whole thing away. Number 11. The China Cabinet with the Wedding Plates. A tall mahogany or oak cabinet with leaded glass doors stood against the long wall of the dining room, and behind the glass sat the full 8-place setting of Lenox or Mikasa china that the family had received for their 1979 wedding. The plates came out twice a year, once at Thanksgiving, once at Easter. The rest of the time, they stayed behind the glass with a small velvet ring around each stem of crystal. The china cabinet was a piece of furniture every newlywed registered for through the 80s, and it was the single largest piece of wood in the house. By 2010, the secondary market had collapsed. The kids who inherited the wedding china did not entertain. The plates went to Goodwill. The cabinet went to the curb. Walk through any furniture consignment store in any small town in America in 2026, and you will find 6 of them lined up against the back wall, marked down from $400 to $90, and not a single one will sell. Number 10. The Foot Massager with Vibrating Rollers. A beige plastic basin with 2 ribbed rollers in the bottom and a heating element sat folded under the bathroom sink. And on a Sunday night, the whole family took turns plugging it in. Warm water went in. 2 feet went in. The rollers vibrated against the arches with a sound like a small lawnmower, and the water sloshed against the hinged splash guard. Conair sold them. Pollenex sold them. Dr. Scholl's sold them. Every drugstore in America carried at least one model in the foot care aisle in 1984, retailing for about $30. The home foot spa lasted into the early 2000s and then quietly stopped showing up under bathroom sinks. The plastic cracked at the seam where the splash guard met the basin. The motor burned out. The heating element stopped warming the water. Today, if a young couple buys a house and the previous owner left one in the linen closet, they look at it the way they look at the ironing board cabinet, the way they look at the wall phone hook, with no clue what it is for. Number 9. The Avon catalog tucked in the magazine rack. A glossy paperback the size of a Reader's Digest arrived through the screen door once every 2 weeks from 1981 through 1989, hand-delivered by a woman in the neighborhood who sold cosmetics on the side, and it lived in the wicker rack next to the sofa with the TV guide and the National Geographic. Inside the cover was an order form. A pen sat on top. The mother of the house circled lipsticks in shades like mocha mauve and coral sunset, made a note next to a small bottle of Sweet Honesty perfume, and clipped a separate insert of the holiday gift items for the kids. The Avon lady came back in 2 weeks with the boxes and a small carbon copy receipt. By the late 80s, Avon had over 1.5 million representatives in the United States alone. The catalog was reaching almost every middle-class household in America, and the brand was a top 5 global cosmetics company. Then Walmart happened. Then the internet happened. Then the women who had sold Avon for 30 years aged out of the route, and nobody under 40 wanted to ring doorbells for a 15% commission. The catalog still exists in a much thinner version, but the magazine rack version is gone, and so is the small ritual of a mother sitting at the kitchen table with a pen, a cup of coffee, and a stack of order forms, picking out a Christmas gift for the babysitter while the 11 o'clock news played in the background. The Avon lady did not just sell perfume. She delivered the catalog, the gossip, the news that the family at the corner house was getting divorced. When the root disappeared, all of that disappeared with her. Number 8. The stir-crazy popcorn maker. A clear plastic dome the size of a small bucket sat upside down over an electric heating plate with a wire arm that swept the kernels around as they popped, and the West Bend Stir-Crazy lived in the cabinet above the refrigerator. The brand had been around since 1911 in West Bend, Wisconsin. The Stir-Crazy hit shelves in the early 70s, and the Model 5346 was a fixture in 1980s kitchens. 3 tablespoons of Crisco went on the heating plate. Half a cup of yellow kernels, lid on, plug in. 5 minutes later, the dome was full of perfect popcorn, and the family flipped the whole machine upside down to use the dome as the serving bowl. Microwave popcorn launched in 1984. Orville Redenbacher had a bag in supermarkets within a year. The Stir-Crazy got pushed to the back of the cabinet by 1989 because nobody wanted to wash the oily heating plate when a paper bag took 90 seconds. West Bend still sells the Stir-Crazy today, but the kitchen ritual around it is gone, and so are the burnt fingers from grabbing the dome too soon. Number 7. The fondue set in the back of the cupboard. A burnt orange enamel pot, a small metal stand, a tin of solid fuel, and 6 color-coded, long-handled forks lived inside a styrofoam-lined gift box on the highest shelf of the kitchen cabinet, and it came down once a year for the dinner party. The Swiss dairy industry had launched a marketing campaign in the early 70s to push fondue into American households. The melting pot chain opened in 1975, and by 1984, every wedding registry in America still listed a fondue set as a standard request. By the mid-80s, the trend was already being mocked as kitsch. Health-conscious eating had taken hold. Cookbooks called fondue dangerous. The fork color coding, the chunks of bread on a stick, the ritual of dipping food into communal melted cheese while a Bee Gees record played, all of it became a punchline. Most sets stayed in the cupboard for 30 years. The fuel tin rusted shut, the forks separated, and the box got donated to Goodwill in 2014 by the kids cleaning out the parents' house after the funeral. Number 6. The Polaroid SX-70 folding camera. A leather-clad chrome box that folded flat to fit in a coat pocket sat on the bookshelf next to the family photo albums, and the SX-70 was the most engineered consumer product Polaroid ever produced. Edwin Land unveiled it at a 1972 shareholder meeting by pulling a folded one out of his suit and producing 5 photographs in 10 seconds. The original SX-70 stayed in production until 1981, and through the early 80s it was the camera at every birthday party, every christening, every backyard barbecue. The film cost about $1 a shot. The picture developed in front of your eyes while somebody waved the print in the air, even though waving did nothing. The Polaroid 600 series replaced the SX-70 by the mid-80s, then 35mm point-and-shoots took the rest. Polaroid kept making time-zero film for the SX-70 until early 2006, and the day they stopped, every camera in America that had been waiting in a drawer to capture another grandchild's first birthday went silent. The film is back, made by a Dutch company. But the moment of pulling a Polaroid out of a coat pocket at a 1985 wedding reception is something no phone has ever quite replaced. Number 5. The 8-track player in the rec room. A wood-grain console unit the size of a microwave sat on a metal cart next to the bar in the basement, and inside it lived an 8-track tape deck, 2 large speakers, and a turntable on the top. The 8-track was invented by Bill Lear in 1965 for car audio. By the early 80s, it was already dying. By 1982, the major record labels had stopped pressing new 8-tracks for retail. Cars stopped including 8-track decks the same year. The last new 8-track release from a major label was Fleetwood Mac's Greatest Hits in 1988, and the home decks went into garage sales for $5 apiece. The tape itself was the problem. It could not rewind. It clicked between tracks at random spots. The foam pad inside the cartridge dried out, the tape stretched, then jammed, then snapped. Cassettes had every advantage. CDs killed both. The 8-track lived on in the rec rooms of fathers who refused to throw out a working machine, sitting on that metal cart with the tapes lined up next to it, in alphabetical order, never played, until the basement got finished in 2003 and the whole console went out with the trash. Number 4. The smoked glass coffee table with the brass legs. A rectangle of dark tinted glass sat on top of 4 spindly polished brass posts in the middle of the living room, and the corners were sharp enough to leave a bruise on a 4-year-old. Roche-Beaubois sold them. Sears sold them. The lower-end versions came in a flat-pack box from a furniture store on the highway and got assembled with an Allen wrench. The brass tarnished within 2 years and turned a dull greenish-brown that no amount of polish could fix. The smoked glass picked up every fingerprint. The glass coffee table was the centerpiece of the formal living room, and every magazine on it had to be fanned out at exactly the right angle. By the early 90s, the smoked glass and brass aesthetic was dead. The country had moved on to oak. Most tables ended up on the curb, the brass legs separated, the glass top wrapped in a moving blanket, the whole thing eventually thrown in a dumpster in 2008 when the original owners downsized. Number 3. The lava lamp on the dresser. A tall, cone-shaped glass bottle filled with water and a colored wax sat on top of a chrome base, and a small bulb at the bottom heated the wax until it broke into floating blobs that drifted up and down for hours. British inventor Edward Craven Walker patented the design in 1963. His company sold the U.S. rights to Lava Light, and by the mid-70s the lamp was selling about 7 million units a year worldwide. By the early 80s, sales had dropped to about 2,500 a year worldwide. The original Lava Light operation was barely keeping the lights on, and in most American homes the lamp had been packed into a closet because it was now embarrassing. The 1990s revival pushed annual sales past 800,000 units, but the original 1980s lamp, sitting on a teenager's dresser between the cassette tapes and a half-empty can of Aquanet, is something different. It came with a specific bedroom. It came with a specific year. It came with a specific kid who turned the switch on at 9 p.m. and watched the wax until the bulb burned out. Number 2. The Sony Walkman, TPSL-2. A small blue and silver metal cassette player with 2 orange foam headphone pads sat on the dresser next to the alarm clock, and the original Walkman had launched in Japan in July of 1979 and reached American shelves in June of 1980 at about $150. Sony predicted it would sell 5,000 units a month. It sold over 30,000 in the first 2 months. By 1986, the word Walkman was in the Oxford English Dictionary. The TPSL-2 had a second headphone jack so 2 people could listen at once, and an orange hot line button that briefly cut the music. The mixtape became its own art form. A teenager spent 3 hours on a Saturday recording songs off the radio onto a TDK 90-minute cassette, hovering over the pause button to catch the start of the next song. The Walkman went through dozens of models. Then the iPod showed up in 2001 and ended the entire format inside 5 years. Most American households still have one somewhere, in a sock drawer or a kitchen junk drawer, with the foam pads disintegrated. Plug a fresh battery into a surviving TPSL-2 and a tape from 1984 will still play. The hiss intact, the song intact, the version of the kid who taped it 42 years ago still holding the pause button. Number 1. The heated waterbed in the master bedroom. A vinyl bladder full of about 200 gallons of tap water sat inside a stained pine pedestal frame against the back wall of the master bedroom. And underneath the mattress, a small electric heating pad kept the water at body temperature 24 hours a day. The waterbed had moved out of the bachelor pad and into the suburban starter home through the late 70s and early 80s. By 1987, it accounted for 1 out of every 5 mattresses sold in the United States. The industry pulled in $2 billion in a single year. Real estate agents listed waterbed-ready bedrooms in classified ads. Then the slide began. Landlords refused to allow them above the ground floor because the joists could not handle the weight. Memory foam launched in the early 90s and made the waterbed feel like sleeping on a pool float. The leaks were biblical. The heater added $30 a month to the electric bill, and moving the bed required draining it with a garden hose for 4 hours. By 2002, the largest waterbed manufacturer had filed for bankruptcy, and the industry's market share had collapsed from 22% to about 5%. The original 1980s heated suburban version, with the wooden pedestal and the velour bedspread and the alarm clock perched on the headboard, exists now only in basements where the previous owner left the frame because it was too heavy to carry up the stairs. These 25 items did not vanish on the same day. They left one at a time, pushed out by a thinner wall, a smaller phone, a cheaper appliance, a rule the regulators finally got around to writing. The painted-over outlines are still on the walls. Tell us in the comments which one lived in your house in 1984 and which one you would put back in the family room tomorrow. These were not just appliances and furniture. They were the shape of an American living room, and the families who lived inside that shape are the only ones who still remember what it felt like.